One of America's most prolific serial killers will now have to spend the rest of his life in prison.
And I'm really sorry to everyone I've hurt.
Why prosecutors say the Golden State Killer's apology is a sham.
Each of us has witnessed a sociopath in action.
From victim impact statements to the sentencing hearing, we'll break down what's next for Joseph DeAngelo and all of the lives he's affected.
I wanted to watch him die.
Law&Crime Report, diving into true crime and today's top legal stories. It's Monday, August 24th, 2020. All right, welcome back to Law&Crime Report. I'm your host, Bob Bianchi. I'll be taking it for the next hour. It is August 24th, 2020, and we are going to go to this Golden State Killer case. It's just really an amazing case, both from the fact that this person terrorized sadistically so many people, so many victims, so much profound loss, and the victims finally got their opportunity in very eloquent and powerful victim impact testimony in order to speak to the court about how this has changed forever, not only the people who were raped, tortured, and killed, but also the families that had to live for all those years not knowing who the perpetrator was. Well, that end has come, and he was being sentenced last week. We've got a lot for you on this, but now, if you recall, during the course of the proceedings, DeAngelo, the defendant, would come in there in a wheelchair, looking very feeble and hobbled, and lots of folks there thought that that was a scam. Let's listen to the Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert on that point.
So after the last 2 years of court proceedings, many people have asked and wondered, really, who is Joseph DeAngelo? Is he a feeble, old 74-year-old man? Is he physically impaired? Is he even competent to stand trial or to enter those guilty pleas we saw on June 29th when he rolled in a wheelchair and feigned feebleness? The answer to those questions that so many people have wondered for the last 2 years lies within the definition of a sociopath. A sociopath, in our world, we understand, is a person who has no respect for the rights of other human beings, no respect for the law, no compassion, no empathy, no remorse. He is a person who lacks a conscience or a soul. And under the definition of a sociopath, he is a person who lies, deceives, and manipulates others for no other reason than personal gain. Over the last 2 years, since the first day he was wheeled into a courtroom for his arraignment in a wheelchair in April of 2018, to the day of his plea on June 29th, to this entire week, sitting stone-faced in front of the world, each of us has witnessed a sociopath in action. The truth of who Joseph DeAngelo is lies not just in what happened in the courthouse, but what has happened in his jail cell. One only needs to look back a few months from today to see the real Joseph DeAngelo. We, as part of this team, felt that it was critically important to show the victims, the public, and perhaps the world, this sociopath in action. And I again would remind you of how things unfolded on June 29th when he pled. This is only a snippet of a CD anybody wishes to have at the end of these proceedings of his actions within his jail cell.
So there's the district attorney. I got two great guests with me today. Kenney, Baden, former assistant prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney par excellence, and a host here at the Law&Crime Network, and Ecleynne, who is also a criminal defense attorney and does some very interesting work in the civil rights field, if you will, with regard to making sure, monitoring elections and making sure that police are doing the accountable thing. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob.
Linda, let me toss to you. We were talking about this a little before. So this prosecutor goes out and they gave a very extensive press conference. Numerous people spoke out at it. It was very powerful. I can tell you as a prosecutor, it gives me a little bit of goosebumps because these are the kind of cases that prosecutors live for. This is the thing that make them feel like they're making a significant impact in society. And what do you think was the reason the district attorney decided to show that video of him in the jail, clearly capable? He's cleaning, he's jumping up and down on his bunk bed. Yes, it belies the wheelchair feebled look that he had in court. But why do you think that she in particular wanted to bring that out?
Well, I guess there was some indication that maybe he was going to ask the court for mercy because he was sick. But, Bob, that didn't happen. All right. And quite frankly, I'm not so interested about what he does in the jail cell. I want to know why he started what he did. I want to know why the cops didn't find him. I want to know why he was employed by two police forces. I want to know why he stopped. So he's climbing on the walls there. He's going to have a long time to climb on all the walls because he's going away for life. But I'd rather hear from the victims. I'd rather hear from the victim's family again. And I want to know why he is who he is. That way, maybe we can stop the next person from becoming the Golden State Killer.
Ecleynne, Linda makes a great point. I raised it actually the other day myself, and I don't know necessarily whether it happened or it didn't happen. But as a prosecutor, even one who's prosecuted death penalty cases but is not a fan of the death penalty, there could be some defense lawyers that are out there saying to themselves, wait a second, my guy commits a singular murder and he gets the death penalty or she gets the death penalty. This guy's done these horrific things and they don't get the death penalty. Well, there was a decision made by the prosecutors to take that off the table. Any thoughts you have on that are welcome. But secondarily, I'd like you to talk to the point that I, as a prosecutor, would have demanded as part of the plea, and maybe this occurred, that I want a full forensic briefing with my people, to Linda's point, to find out what makes a guy like this tick so that we can get the data and information to see, other people who may be a similar profile. Thoughts on any of that?
Well, first off, I think that the plea deal kind of made sense, unfortunately. He was charged with a litany of not only murders, but rapes. So can you imagine having to relive, having to rehash, but also for the prosecutors and law enforcement, they would have to see where they failed. And they failed often with regards to this case. I would be remiss if I did not if the catching of the Golden State Killer, if we did not acknowledge Michelle McNamara, who wrote I'll Be Gone in the Dark, who actually kind of stalked the Golden State Killer by herself all the way until her death. And it had to be a private citizen to do that. I think that a trial would have shown all the loopholes, all the holes in how he was able to not only not be caught, but thrived and caught all types of victims. So I can understand why they would offer him life. Is it fair? No. But understand, like, the amount of money to prosecute all these cases, the amount of emotional turmoil, even the sentencing was emotionally, hard for me. And I only did a day of it because I could not take it all. So I can understand why they did that. But like Ms. Linda stated, why? How did it happen? How was he able to be? Employed as a law enforcement officer? Like, how was that able to happen? Who did that? Who dropped the ball and kicked it? That's what I want.
It's funny, and I got to give Linda, before we were on air, she actually opined in the same area that there were a lot of mistakes she believes made by police. And very interesting point you guys are bringing out, that the prosecutor may have taken into the fact that this, quote unquote, may have been a botched investigation. I don't know. Having been in that spot, I don't know if that would have affected me. I would have been concerned more about the parity, P-A-R-I-T-Y, of people who do far less and get the death penalty as opposed to somebody who's done far more. But great commentary, guys. Listen, also, DeAngelo spoke during the sentencing, and we're going to listen to the prosecutor's reaction to that allocution, as they call it.
I've listened to all your statements, each one of them. And I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
I am begging you not to report it that way. I think it was my colleague from Tulare County who said that this is going to go into the history books. The history cannot be remembered that he stood up here and apologized to the victims. It can't be that his niece said he was the most beloved person in her life. It can't be a friend who said he was one of the he was the sixth boy in the family. That was an effort to humanize him. You cannot humanize him. I feel so sorry for the family members and the friends who had any connection whatsoever. I don't besmirch them or in any way denigrate what they tried to offer here today. But I will not allow, as an elected prosecutor representing at least the 3.3 million people in Orange County, to have him remembered that way during his sentencing. It was a sham. He was not remorseful. He failed to apologize to important people. He left devastation in his tracks. I can never forgive him. Some of you are more mature and more spiritual than me. You have gone to a higher place than I can. I can't forgive him. I never will, which is why I told him I wanted to watch him die. I wanted to watch him put to death.
All right, so that's the Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer there. So there were multiple jurisdictions involved. Linda, I want to go back to you. I found it, from my taste, a little over the top. You know, I used to tell my prosecutors we judge conduct, not people. The defense has a right to present this information. He certainly has a right to rebut that information. But the last comment that he's saying is, I wanted to see him. He brings in, I'm an elected official, which I hate, Linda. You know, I hate this.
I know.
As opposed to appointed prosecutors who don't have to worry about votes. And then he says, I wanted to see him die. Well, I go back to the same point. You had those opportunities and you waived them. Well, did that speech make sense to you in that regard?
No, Bob. And I just cringed and I wrote down, because I knew you were going to say the same thing. Because in New Jersey, where you and I are from, you know, you're appointed based on your merit and all. But elected official, look, this is not about him. This is about those people who spoke. Some of which who said they forgive him, some of which who obviously want to see him cut off at the sneakers. Okay, but this was about them. And yes, you can say, you know, he shouldn't have spoke. He's not going to be remembered that way. No one's remembering this guy as like a charmer. All right. I mean, I said last week, I thought he was going to speak, not because he wants to apologize, but because he always wants to be on top, right? He always wanted to be the last one out of the house with a husband's tied up or killed people. I mean, that's who he is. So no one's saying this guy is a great guy and apologize. But we should be remembering these victims. And if you want to do these victims justice, get everybody together, like an NTSB report, go through the files and find out what went wrong that you didn't find this guy for all this time.
All right, Ecleynne, thoughts about the district attorney? I am curious because I've never spoken to you before. Out there in Georgia, I believe there are elected district attorneys, and as Linda pointed out, here in Jersey, I was appointed by the governor. We're all appointed. Do you find that this is where politics bleeds into the law a little too much?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of pandering because it's not really being clear. We knew, you know, those who are in the legal field absolutely knew that a deal was placed, and then to come after the sentencing and say, I wish, you know, I wanted you to die. It's not consistent, and it's actually, you're just lying to your constituents, and it makes no sense. This man has committed over 161 crimes that we know of. And if you really think about how big that is, like, he damaged whole family trees. Whole generations have been snuffed out. He did more damage than like a small militia. This man is a menace to society. And the fact is that people in law enforcement, prosecutors, how they treated the victims, how they didn't take their victim statements, how they treated their victims after the crime was committed was just subpar. And I think that we could have prevented so many more crimes if somebody didn't drop the ball. And that's what we really need to find out.
Now, and Linda, to this point a little bit that you're both making, and they're excellent points, we do have to remember this was decades ago. And I go back to being a baby assistant prosecutor doing homicide cases. And this is going to shock people by today's standards. But we did not even notify the victims' families about what it was that we were doing or not doing with regard to the resolution of a case. So victims' rights and victims' rights bills have really escalated in favor of the victims over these past couple of decades. So, and the science has changed tremendously. And investigative techniques have, including, Linda, I'm interested in your point on this. Law enforcement typically was siloed a lot of times in investigations. They were very covetous of their information. It wasn't until after September 11th, 2001 that we realized we needed to come together to share information. So it was a different time, Linda, no?
Well, no, it was a different time, but you and I are both prosecutors and maybe part of a different time. And he did have victim witness, at least when I was there, victim witness assistance units. But you always had the problem where people were trying to have their own territory and who got credit for an arrest, right, Bob? That's a problem. But maybe that's one of the things that you have to go in and say, look, when you've got this kind of wide swath, you just can't rely on DNA because sometimes DNA won't get you anything. Here, we didn't have DNA. They did try something called the proteins, as you know, and he was what was called a non-secretor, which means they couldn't get anything from his seminal fluid. But at some point, somebody had to go back and say, let's look at this and maybe start with those two police departments. What did people know and when did they know it? Because remember, he got terminated from shoplifting, things like, something to put the dog off and all. So, I mean, there may have been signs, Bob.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sure many people are going to do a deep dive into that to see where things went right and or wrong. Guys, thank you for the great commentary. We got to take a real quick break here at the Law and Crime Network, but we'll have a lot more. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to Law and Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be hosting the rest of the show, and we are talking about the Sacramento killer, Joseph DeAngelo. And there's a lot of questions, and my great guests have kind of talked about some of this stuff right now. But reporters were very interested. I'm sure the audience is very interested in a couple of questions that include why or did he in fact stop in 1986, and what was actually taken from his home during the actual search warrants and the evidence that's seized. To me, I'd be fascinated to see that inventory list. Let's listen to those questions being asked of the Sacramento County District Attorney Schubert.
Certain are we that he stopped committing these crimes in the late 80s? And if he did stop them, can you offer any insight as to how someone like that might have been able to stop them? And did it bleed out and did it push out in other ways in his life? Since then, were there other signs? I'm just curious what your insight is.
I think I tried to answer that earlier. I don't think we'll ever know. I mean, honestly, on the day of his arrest, I got a text message from a colleague of a Wikipedia article about when did forensic DNA come into existence, and it coincidentally was 1986. And so, the question needs to be posed to Mr. DeAngelo.
The items that were taken from his home, could you speak to what those items were and if any of those were ever returned to some of the victims or survivors, if they belonged to them?
I don't think I can speak to those. I don't think so. I don't know about Amy or Tin or any of the prosecutors, but I don't think it's, at this point, I don't believe the arrest warrant or the search warrants have been unsealed from the court, so I don't think it would be appropriate to comment at this point. Maybe someday, though.
All right, Ecleynne, what do you make? I mean, I get the idea if the arrest warrants and search warrants, I've never heard of an arrest warrant being sealed, but I have heard that for search warrants, but unseal them. Let the public know. That was a really good question that reporter asked. Did you find your trophy pieces inside of his home and return them to the victims? I mean, that they are not going to be able to hide from that for much longer.
No, I think they're just CYAing. I think they're just covering themselves from potential. It makes no sense. He was there. Y'all dropped the ball. Just tell us how bad it is. I think they don't want to tell us how bad the law enforcement and how bad the prosecutor's office actually messed this case up. Just tell us so we know, so victims' family, other victims who don't know, if other victims' family don't know that the Golden State Killer is the reason why their loved ones is not here, give them some type of closure, but let us know how bad it is. let us get a gauge of how bad it actually is. Let us get a gauge, a barometer of how much you've messed up. That's all. We already know you've done it. Just tell us how bad it is so we can fix it and move on.
Yeah, Linda, to that point, and we kind of discussed this a little bit before offline, there was nothing that prevents, it reminds me of that case, I'm trying to think of it, that we covered gavel to gavel here at the Law&Crime Network, where the families, the man killed the two daughters and the mother, and there was never a debriefing of him. He accepted that he was going to plead guilty, but there was never an explanation. There was never context given. Everybody was wondering why and the motive. I mean, as a prosecutor, you do have the ability to say, if you give me full and complete and truthful cooperation, because people want to know, can you just turn on and turn off such conduct? And after 1986, there was never an incident. I think a lot of people are going to find that hard to believe. Thoughts?
Yeah, Bob, absolutely. We know that he was separated from his wife, right? And she didn't actually file for divorce until after he was arrested, but they weren't living together for years. We know that he's got family, and a lot of the victims don't want to get his family involved, which is the right move. But look, you've got things taken from his house. You've got a list of things taken from all the victims. So you look at the things taken from his house, all the trophies, if you will, because he was a big trophy collector, collecting rings and everything from people's houses. And you see, okay, we have this belonged to this crime. Now we have these 10 items, right? And they don't seem to belong to anybody, and they don't belong to anybody in the house. Let's go out and see whether there were other crimes. But you get all this, you get a debriefing, because now what's going to happen, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to write a book, and somebody's going to go and he's going to give an interview, and then he's going to tell all this stuff, but there'll be no way to checking it against what the police files are. So I find it a little disingenuous to say, well, we really can't give you that answer right now because we don't know.
The only explanation I can come up with, and it's just a speculative one from having been in the seat, is that there is continuing investigation going on. I just find that really hard to believe. You had the opportunity when you had it in the grips of a plea scenario and a sentencing scenario, and after that, you pretty much lose control over getting data from a defendant. So it is perplexing. Anyway, DeAngelo didn't go into the night without trying to put some sort of defense forward. As you saw earlier, he allocuted and indicated he was sorry and remorseful, whether you believe that or not. But his sister also gave a statement to the court. Let's take a listen.
From his sister. I feel moved towards writing this so that my brother Joe will know that my love for him will never go away. That's to say also that my sadness does not fade regarding the charges against him. As I think back and try to more clearly understand it all, so many things come to mind. Don't misunderstand that I am searching for an excuse for it all, because I'm not. I do more or less blame our father in part. He was a stern military career man and also a womanizer. He was also responsible for causing abuse in our family, mainly being hard on Joe and our mother. Both mental and physical abuse was usually directed to them. It got to be more than I and my siblings could stand, so we all chose to leave home at early ages. I left at 15, and my siblings followed before any of them turned 18. There were so many other things that Joe faced, and I'm sure he couldn't cope with it all. Of course, it will never justify what has happened, and I can only express my deepest sympathy to all of the survivors and to the families of the victims. May God bless each of you.
All right, Linda, let's get to some defense strategy here. First off, you got to give the woman credit. She went in on behalf of her brother, and I'm sure subjected to tremendous abuse, and I'm sure she is going to receive tremendous abuse for giving that allocution or that statement on behalf of her brother. But we all know as defense lawyers what the sentence was going to be here. It was a life sentence. Does she give us an insight into something, kind of like what we were talking before about abuse and things of that nature? Or as a defense lawyer, you having handled many high-profile defense cases, would you just basically say, sit down, when you stand well, stand still, you don't allocute, I don't want your sister up there, let's just get this sentence through so that we don't re-traumatize these victims? Thoughts?
Well, here, Bob, is the one thing. we also know that he has family, right? He has a daughter who's a doctor, apparently, from what I've read. He was living with his granddaughter and his daughter. At the time he was arrested, he's got another daughter who's, I believe, has either her PhD or advanced degrees. So for some reason, he had this family that appeared to be normal. And I think this statement is really directed towards them to try to say, okay, there are some good things out there. And he may be the aberration, but maybe it's not genetic, in hopes that maybe people will leave his family alone.
Ecleynne, what do you think? Would you put this out there in the public, knowing that it's going to be a life sentence anyway, or would you have them get up there to give these statements? I think it's a kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah, it is definitely tricky, but I guess in this case, in which it's a whole bunch of speculation on why he became this murderer, why he became this rapist, to get some background from the family members. Actually, although right now it doesn't seem helpful, but I think for the victim's family, it may provide, as you said, some insight into what created this monster and how he was able to just separate himself as a family man to this monster, and how it was able to go for decades upon decades. I think that it just gives us a little bit of insight. She actually gave us more information than the prosecutor did.
Yeah, I got to tell you, just from having been around the block and been in courts both as a prosecutor and defense lawyer in homicide cases, the victim's family never, in my experience, ever appreciates hearing from the defendant or anybody from their family. In fact, the victims oftentimes think that the tables are tilted against them, and it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 jurors, the presumption of innocence. They're agitated and sometimes feel re-victimized in the actual process itself, Linda.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Bob. And look, when we listen to these victims, I mean, we all wanted to cry. I mean, forget the fact that we're seasoned attorneys, that we even defend people that accuse of murder. We all wanted to cry because they were just they were tormented for years, and despite what they said, they're still going to be tormented by this man who really destroyed life upon life upon life. But I understand why this may have been done for the purpose. What I really want to know, Bob, is what did his separated wife know? I mean, because somebody had to know something for all these years. Okay, remember his girlfriend Bonnie, right? The one he was engaged to. She broke it off when he tried to abduct her by gunpoint. This was in the 1980s.
Well, it goes as point number 1 or 1A when you're doing a criminal investigation or any investigation for that matter, and there is an estranged wife, that you want to be running to that door and finding out what information they have, because they typically have quite a bit and sometimes a motive to bring it out. Great point, Linda. Ecleynne, thank you so much. We've got to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network. We have a lot more coming up, so stick with us. We'll be right back. So there's DeAngelo doing what DeAngelo does best, torturing people, not just the people that he killed in the heinous manner in which he killed them, but for years afterwards, making phone calls like the one you heard, scaring and frightening these people. This was all just so demented and twisted, and these people were tortured. Many families having listened to stuff like this. There was actually a 7-year-old when DeAngelo broke into her home, and she was tied up. The mother was tied up, and he raped the mother. She is a survivor. Let's listen to what she has to say.
The defendant would call and harass my mother for quite some time. The detectives installed an answering machine on her phone, and we put a whistle next to it. My parents would eventually divorce, and my mother and I would eventually move out of our dream home. She was still receiving creepy calls 10 years after the attack. As a child, I I actually almost wanted the monster to return. This time I'll be ready, I told myself. I slept with knives under my pillow and kept scissors in my pockets. I had backup plans on top of backup plans. I fantasized about having a second chance to kill him because I froze the first time. I didn't grab his gun when he put it down to tie my wrists. I don't even think I'd so much as shot a toy gun, but I was preparing in my mind. I felt I'd failed at my job to save my mother and protect my family. I wanted a do-over, an opportunity to right the wrongs and see that justice got served. Injustice has always been a hot button for me. I hate seeing evil people get away with evil deeds. My name is Lisa Marie Lilienthal, and I am Jane Doe number 28. I would come to know the defendant, the monster, as the East Area Rapist. As a direct result of the heinous actions of the defendant, I have plenty of scars. No child should have to question if God forgot about her and her family. Ultimately, this was a shattering of innocence. Physical wounds heal, but the body holds trauma on a cellular level, and I carry plenty of residual effects. Psychologically, I don't always feel like I'm a fully functional human being a lot of the time. I've struggled with anxiety and depression, been diagnosed with PTSD by many doctors. I'm definitely OCD, especially in regards to my safety. I double check alarms, locks, my surroundings, and second guess myself. I absolutely have control issues and can get overly anxious, particularly in situations where I feel trapped, powerless, and out of control. And to this day, I still have night terrors, even more this summer.
Well, Linda, this is like listening to the victims. You said it before, how courageous and compelling, and at times difficult to listen to. But this is what the trauma of being a victim is all about. It becomes the centerpiece of life. That woman, Lisa Marie, that just spoke, was 7 years old as her mother was tied down and raped. She had scissors. She wanted him to come back. I think a lot of times the emotional damage done by people like DeAngelo is worse than death itself in some instances, because it's a constant prison, and they have to they evaluate their lives. It seems to be, from the many victims that I've spoken to, where it's always relating back to that. They don't know what normalcy is anymore because of that trauma. Heart-wrenching.
So Bob, okay, so when I looked at that picture of him, I've actually had to throw away every picture of him, including I had to give away Michelle McNamara's book because I couldn't handle it. All right. And I'm pretty seasoned about, pretty awful things that we see. All right. And I got chills sitting here. I'm safe here. I'm safe. Right. I got chills listening to that call. But this is a victim that wouldn't have been heard if we had not gotten this deal for life imprisonment. She would just be Jane Doe number 28, but she's not. She has a name. And this is heart-wrenching to listen to her. And you can imagine her mom, who was raped and tied up, but to listen to her. And you know what, Bob? If she, as a young girl, had killed this guy, if he came back, right, and not being quite threatened, then she would have been arrested. And that's where our criminal justice system goes wrong. We really need to listen to these people and have a better system, because I'll tell you what, this case, just listening from afar, has really just affected my psyche, and I'm not a victim.
Yeah, well, and Ecleynne, I think that the reason for that is the randomness of it. And I think that the public at large believes that many of the times murders occur, and many times it's true, it's because of a relationship issue, or it's because of crime-related issues. But there are a statistical percentage of people that are out there in the world waiting at a moment's notice for crimes of opportunity, whether it be kidnapping of children or committing crimes such as DeAngelo. They do exist. And as a prosecutor, it would be hard to go around to your communities and say this, but you need to be situationally aware and try to target harden yourself and make sure you're with somebody when you're walking into our parking lots, and the various tips, which I suggest anybody go on any crime prevention website. They tell you. I think what Linda's getting to is it strikes at the heart of it, because it could be you, it could be me, it could be anybody when you're talking about a guy like DeAngelo.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating because I know a kid who stole a piece of gum from Walmart and can't go to any Walmart anymore and got fired from Walmart because of stealing a piece of gum. This law enforcement officer also committed a crime of moral turpitude, which is the shoplifting, and not only kept his job but was transferred. So we have to go through there. That's the system that we're dealing with. That is the problem. The issue is that the checks and balances should have caught him in the 70s. That's when the checks and balances should have caught him, and it just weakened the system. And I cannot listen to that tape. Like, that scares me. I am frightened. And just like Linda says, I'm in my house because this is what we have to deal with. And you know what's even worse is that, yes, he's caught. Yes, he's spending life in prison, but it still will not bring the catharsis that these victims and these victims' family thought it was supposed to bring. He's still the boogeyman. He's still out there. And it just, it's painful.
Yeah. Ecleynne, you bring a great point. There's an initial kind of high, if you will, quote unquote, when the system's going and the murderer is being sentenced. But then there's this vacuous hole after that. No one's really talking to you. The camaraderie kind of goes away, and then it settles in that the person's never coming back, or the trauma will always be there. I've seen that time and time again. Great point. Guys, listen, I appreciate your commentary. Awesome. We got another block to go. We're going to take a quick break here at the Law&Crime Network. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Law&Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. We are doing the Golden State Killer case, and there was an individual, Victor Hayes, who claims that DeAngelo, when he was working as a police officer at the time, broke into his home and attacked his girlfriend. Now, this is very consistent with the theme that my guests are talking about with regard to what had gone on years before. Let's take a listen to Mr. Hayes.
I want to say that there's two people that I've never met that I want to address something to. And that would be his former boss, and that would be the man's wife. And I believe that both these people could have put an end to this long before it got to wherever it was. And because they didn't have the fortitude to do this, they got a lot of people hurt. And they hurt me. And I want them to know that they hurt me by not stepping up to the plate, doing their job, by laying down with them and giving them kids and covering for them. This man sold his house while he was in jail. How is that possible? I can't even sue him because the laws protect police and protect police departments. So I'm told I can't do nothing. He sold his house while he was in jail. Unbelievable. So I just want those people to know that personally for me, they caused me a lot of grief and discomfort. But I want to say that regardless of what you might think, this has not defined me as an individual. I mean, it's changed me, but it's made me tougher. It's made me some other things too. It's made me question authority. But it's not overwhelmed me. I don't have nightmares. I feel bad for all these people and all these women. I truly believe that this man has something in his pocket, knowledge or something in his pocket that allowed him to elude capture for so much time. I don't know exactly what that is, but I just know the nature of men and people. And I think that without that confidence, that he wasn't going to get caught. And I think it's more than braggadocious, arrogant ego, that he couldn't have had a second life and did what he did and live in our society without looking over his shoulder all the time. He's not a drug addict. He's not an alcoholic, I understand. He just had a completely another life, and no one could have the average individual. He's not Satan and he's not Christ. He's a human being.
Interesting. Linda, listen to some of the points that Mr. Hayes is bringing out, kind of along the lines of we've been talking about throughout the show. He's specifically pointing out to the wife and the boss, to my knowledge, there is no information with respect to that, but he's using his intuitive spidey sense, if you will. And this is what investigators do all the time. We talked about the wife is certainly somebody to go towards. The boss, anybody. You do a chronology, you do a history, you go through all their social contacts, you try to find, and I'm not saying they didn't do that, but that certainly would be important to revisit again right now. And then he makes an interesting comment about that he had knowledge on how to elude capture somewhere in his pocket. What do you think about these comments that are made by Mr. Hayes?
Obviously, he was a police officer. 6 years, he was a police officer. I think that is what Mr. The victim here, Victor Hayes, is saying, okay? And let me tell you, Bob, these victims were treated terribly. If we listened to them last week, the women were questioned about whether they were raped, whether they deserved to be raped. It was outrageous. I think that we need to go back and hold everyone's feet to the fire. And I know that Ecleynne Mercy has a lot to say about this point.
Okay, Ecleynne, it's up to you.
I think that the citizens of Sacramento should demand transparency, and they should also demand a reevaluation of qualified immunity. I think that the qualified immunity is what prevented a lot of justice from being served earlier on. The citizens deserve transparency. They deserve to know what their system, what kind of system that they're living in, and what law enforcement are doing and are not doing in these cases. And I really, really think that they should reevaluate qualified immunity. I think it's qualified immunity that allowed this monster to be on the streets as long as he did.
Well, as a former prosecutor, I would love to have the debate with that qualified immunity issue, because there's two sides to the coin on that. But I want to go to the point about transparency you bring out. Let's face it, we talked about this before. A lot of times these true crime aficionados, people that like to watch the show, sometimes private citizens, like in this particular case, having separate eyes, may have information, may have a different way of thinking about it. So, Linda, what harm is there to release the entire file now that this case is concluded to the public? I understand during an investigation why it is, but why not now?
There's none, and there needs to be a whole internal examination. Let the police have a whole internal examination, like the women had a whole internal examination when they were raped, okay? I mean, you really need to stop any cover-up that's going on, release everything, let everybody look through it, and maybe we can find a solution so that this will not happen again.
And Ecleynne, to this point, they say 1986, and that's kind of like a stop point. That may or may not make sense to us. It's either accurate or it's not. Generally speaking, I'd say it probably isn't. It could be information found in that file that another loved one who somebody had died in all the way across the country in a suspicious kind of way that looks at that file and says, oh my God, and connects dots to some other kind of crime. So why not get as many eyes on that file as you can?
Absolutely. But they're covering up for their boys. They're covering up for their people. Like, people do not want to put themselves in a position in which they can lose their jobs, they can lose their livelihoods. That's unfortunate. It's like people are out for themselves. And with regards to, he picked up a lot of trophies from most of his victims. You may want to look into the ex-wives, the daughters, and look at what gifts he gave them. If he's that sadistic to do that phone call, if he's that sadistic to commit the crimes how he did it, it would not be outside of the imagination for him to also gift those trophies to other people.
Okay, just real quick, in 5 seconds or less, Linda, do you think there's more out there?
Yes, this guy just didn't start and stop like on the dime.
Ecleynne?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Okay. Well, guys, listen, I really appreciate all of your great insight. You know, we cover Gavel to Gavel here at the Law and Crime Network. Unfortunately, this show is done. Stay tuned for our regularly scheduled program. You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram at @RBianchiESQ. Have a great day.